What we owe the future. This is a very, very interesting book, and a book that really changes your whole perspective, not only around the world that you live in, but around the world that people previously lived in, and the world in which people will most likely live in the future. And this is not about 200 years in the past. This is not only about the present and the near past or the near future. This is about the present, the long past, and the long future. Talking about trillions, billions. We're not talking about hundreds. We're talking about billions, trillions in digits, various things. And this is, in general, just a very, very, very big glimpse into everything concerning humanity primarily. So maybe I said nothing while I was saying all that, but at the same time, it just demonstrates that this book really changes the perspective and really gives you a totally different lenses into how you view life, how you view the future, how you view what you do. So yeah, basically, to summarize this book in one word, we can summarize it in long-termism. Okay, so what is long-termism? Let's see what ChatGPT says. So, long termism is a philosophical and ethical view about how we should prioritize our actions, especially when thinking about the future, the far future. At its core, long termism says that the possibility of influencing the long term future should be a key moral priority of our time, because one, future could be vast. Here's one of the primary points. And the reason why I'm summarizing this book in that word is because literally this book is all about that philosophy. I'm going to be talking a little bit more in depth about very interesting ideas, insights, or things that the book talks about. But this is, I think, a great way to view it. So first idea that really changes your perspective is that the future could be vast. So, you know, probably when you're talking with people or based on your interactions you have had with other humans throughout your life, you have talked about the future, right? And oh, 200 years from now, 100 years from now, 50 years from now. And, a lot of the times, frankly, a lot of people say, oh, the future, it's not going to be good. Like, basically, a lot of people are not very in optimism, right? And obviously, whenever you look at the challenges of climate change or even the propaganda, because this is very influenced by propaganda, by, the legacy media, even social media, like, there's a lot of noise in regards to problems like climate change. There's people that literally 10 years ago, I remember 10 years ago, said that 10 years from now, meaning right now in this moment, the world will be absolutely, destroyed by climate change. Obviously, as you can see, that's not true. And that's the thing. There's a lot of noise nowadays in regards to various problems like climate change, one of them. And therefore, a lot of people just don't have like the critical thinking skills to address this noise. And I'm not saying that I'm someone who has great critical thinking skills. I still need a have a long way to go. Um, but yeah, I have significantly improved it. But that's another thing. Basically, what I'm saying here is that a lot of people just have like a view into the future that's negative or that just cannot be improved or whatever. And oftentimes, most of the source of those views were not even didn't even came from them, were just something that they saw on the news or social media or whatever. So uh, the point here with the first idea that the future could be vast is that a lot of people just don't realize how vast could the future be. Like a lot of people, for example, with these ideas of climate change and how we're gonna die in 100 years, literally tell you, hey, we're gonna die in 100 years, and therefore the future is not gonna be best. Or simply people that just don't haven't thought big enough. So yeah, that's many ways in which, you know, to a lot of people that think all those things, this book really changes their perspective. So the future could be best. So humanity or its descendants might exist for millions, even billions of years. Here's the thing, millions, even billions of years, potentially spreading across planets or galaxies. That means most people who will ever live could be in the future, not the present. This is something incredible because we have always obviously seen the perspective that, you know, since the beginning of humanity, right? Whenever, yeah, our species started to like gain the amount of intelligence or whatever that very similar to the one we currently have. There have been a lot of humans that have walked Earth, right? Not a lot of humans have existed, and therefore there have been more humans, or basically more humans are dead than alive. I don't know if you can uh, understand me there. And that's one way to view it. But another way you view it, and obviously this book emphasizes it a lot, is that there could be, and obviously the cool word here is crucial because obviously we don't know what could happen, man. World War III and a thermonuclear war for like type of war, world war could happen and literally could wipe us all out. And I'm gonna talk about that because the book also talks about that and those situations. So that could is very important, but it also gives you hope. So basically, that cold, is actually true, and we still continue. Then most people who will ever live will be in the future, not the present, not the past, and that's crazy because just think about the incredible amount of human lives, human experiences that haven't been born, that haven't been experienced, that are in the future, but just haven't happened yet. That's a very interesting thing to think about. So yeah, that's the first thing. The future could be best. Second, our actions today can have lasting effects, and this is a very important point. Decisions in areas like technology, environment, politics, and global risk will shape whether humanity thrives or collapses. I think this is way more understandable, a better way to say it. So I mean, who knows? Maybe you're no longer human, you're a cyborg, but you still have that consciousness. Whatever. Trillions of units of consciousness, of species of consciousness that was, as we identify as humans, that could be affected, that are literally going to be affected by the things that we do right now. Right now. That is another very interesting point that the book talks about. I'm gonna talk about it later. But yeah, that's another very interesting point, which is literally all those trillions of lives, all those trillions of possible lives could be, and no, 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 it's not even about code. Is are literally going to be affected by the actions that we have and you are doing today. So, but this basically just tells you the incredible impact that you're going to have in the future, even if you don't know it yet. Like, obviously, this sounds a little bit like, oh, that's bullshit, but like, just think about it. I mean, obviously, there's like, I don't know, the president of the United States is going to have more impact than, someone that is working a 9 to 5 and McDonald's. I don't know. But like, still, the one that is having a 9 to 5 and McDonald's is having some impact. I don't know. Like, collectively, like, one thing is certain, like, humanity right now is literally going to impact the trillions of life in the future. That is certain. That is a third certain thing because we're literally the ones who are going to be uh, creating the future human beings, right? So that is another thing that is very, very important to address, and that this book really um, lays out in an incredible form, which is that our actions today can have lasting effects. Um, and obviously, decisions in technology, environment, politics, global risks. I mean, not only could shape whether humanity thrives or collapses, but generally just skips it. And just understanding that I think is a great way to just be like, okay, we gotta be more intentional of we gotta or it just gives you a different lens into how you view different what you do, right? Or what humanity does collectively. Third thing of long-termism is preventing existential risks. So preventing existential risk is super important, is a priority because with events like nuclear war, runaway climate change, engineered pandemics, or misaligned artificial intelligence that currently since 2022, since that ChatGPT moment until right now 2025, that's something that has been increasing in the conversation of everyone, so that's great. So yeah, there's all of these risks and potential existential risks could permanently limit or end humanity's potential. So preventing them or minimizing them, because for example, the one of climate change is already happening, like the effects that humanity has had on the last centuries, in the last couple of hundred years, is already happening. The only way forward is minimizing its effects. So and a lot of all these are you know uh, uh, are about preventing, like for example, nuclear war and whatever. So basically, preventing all these existential risks are moral priority, are super important. Um, what else? Supporters argue that long-termism doesn't mean ignoring current problems. That's another thing, because yeah, you're thinking too much in the future. What about today? Here's the thing, like supporters argue that long-termism doesn't mean ignoring current problems like poverty or injustice, but rather recognizing that safeguarding and improving the long-term trajectory of civilization could be one of the most impactful things we can do. Critics sometimes worry it might justify neglecting urgent present-day suffering or give too much weight to speculative scenarios. So obviously that's something that is up to debate, but basically long-termism is caring not just of people alive today, but apart from caring of the people alive today, also about the potential vast number of people in the future and acting to make their lives better or possible at all. So that's literally how I could summarize the book. It's basically about long termism, and I think it's an incredibly important philosophy that everyone should at least know about, right? I'm not saying, hey, I don't want to like force anyone to be like, hey, if you don't really care about this, do it. Like, no, this is not the way. But at least taking into consideration, at least know about it, I think will be super great. And that's actually something that the book is talking about in the last few pages. To even if you're not that interested, or you're not actively having like a tangible impact in regards to all of this, at least knowing about it or at least talking about it to people, I think is a great way to obviously spread the idea. Um, so yeah, I really like the idea. I think most humans, the majority of humanity actually like the idea. I just need to get spread, right? Or at least those lenses need to be spread to care about the future in the way the book talks about. So, um, you know, here's the thing. The book basically is like divided into the following things I'm going to be talking about in more in depth about each one of them. First, the part one is the long view, which as I said, basically, hey, this is the incredible impact. No, this is the incredible amount of lives that could be living in the future. This is how the future could be, or whatever, and how you can actually shape the course of history. Because right now, all of the things that humanity does in the present day are going to affect the future in an incredible way. Then the part two is basically about uh, changes in trajectory. So here's talking about moral change and value locking. These are two very important things that are very interesting. The case of moral change, obviously talks about morality and how it has changed. You know, if you look at history, it has changed quite a lot. Obviously, 500 years ago, slavery, for example, and is one of the primary examples that the book talks about. I mean, that was very common, right? And it's actually surprising. Slavery was in a lot of countries, slavery wasn't like illegal or, no longer morally accepted until like the 21st century, like no 20th century, like we're talking about like 1960, 1970, like that wasn't that long ago. And that's the thing, like basically talk about uh moral change. So if 500 years ago something that seemed morally uh like moral is no longer moral today, it's very likely that things that we view as that are moral today are not going to be like accepted in 500 years from now. So that's a thing that is very interesting thing. It's very interesting to think about, because when we're talking about positively affecting the future, we need to take into account all of these variables, and this is to spread the right ideas, or the ideas that are gonna mm, possibly affect the most in the future. And this is where we get to the value locking concept. And basically, value locking, based on this name, is literally just the values that are going to be locked in. That's basically what it means. And what that means um, is basically the values, the ideas. Um, basically, the book talks about that the values and ideas, like no matter how like questionable or morally questionable they seem, they have the possibility to lock in. What do I mean by locking? Basically spread through humanity, and or through a very great amount of people, and basically stay there. Like obviously locking sounds yeah, locking, you know. What do you mean by that? Like basically it spreads, um like, for example, to make this clear, Christianity, right? Like Christianity is literally one of the biggest religions in the world. That is an idea, that is a value that has stayed locked in for a long time, right? So basically, people still believe in whatever. So and I think that's a great example. And here's this is very interesting. This is a very interesting thing, because you know, when you think about it, when you don't think about this that much, you're like, okay, you know, it's like, for example, you have, let's say you have a morally unaccepted idea here, or value. Like your normal thinking, or when you don't think that much about that, is like saying, how is that idea gonna ever spread? Like, there's no way. Like, people are not dumb. You have that like superficial layer of thinking, but when you really think about it deeply, and as I said, this is very valuable of history. When you look at history, that's not the case. Like, any idea, no matter how morally unacceptable they may seem, has the potential to lock in for a long time. So let's talk about even a very recent example, the Nazis, right? And the ideas of the Nazis. You know, that was literally in the 20, like that was literally past century, 1920s, 1930s, 40s. Like that wasn't that much. That wasn't that long ago. Like it was a couple of generations ago, literally the past century. That was not that long ago. And I mean, just think about it. 1940, like we haven't like right now we're in 2025. 1940 was less than 100 years ago. So we're talking about that the ideas of Nazism, that's not how you pronounce it, but basically the ideas of the Nazis wasn't, you know, were around like a lot of people heads, a lot of people heads in Europe and Germany, um, less than 100 years ago. So that's crazy. And this is a great example of value locking. Obviously right now, looking back, most people, because there's still quite some people that, have that idea, but most people think that is like a crazy idea and is obviously morally unacceptable. But here's the thing, any idea, no matter if they like seem morally unacceptable has like the potential to lock in. And you know, obviously when you say why, well, there's a lot of variables, right? There's a lot of variables. There's, obviously the time in history. Like there's a lot of variables that need to align in order to obviously lock in. And that's the thing that the book also talks about. There's, obviously variables that can come into play, um, that make certain ideas lock in and others not. But the idea here is that all ideas, no matter if they're morally acceptable or not, have that potential. It just needs the right environment to lock in, right? So basically, what does it tell us? Practically, okay. So practically, what we need to do is basically push the best ideas, the ideas that affect the future in the best way possible, and those are the ideas that need to be locked in, right? Obviously, it's simpler. It's much more simpler said than done. But that's like one great way to just understand. Okay, if we know that a lot of ideas, like once you understand that, you're in a totally new different level. Because now you understand that any idea, no matter like any idea, can literally lock in with the right environment. So, for example, the book also talks about slavery a lot, and it basically says, hey, the reason why most of the world, like in most parts of the world right now, currently, slavery, um, I mean, you could come up with the argument that, oh, but today, like right now, we still live in slavery. That's just has just transformed. Right now, it's modern slavery. We're not going to talk about that. We're literally going to talk about slavery, like literally, how was it in like 500 years ago, where you literally owned a person, like that type of slavery. Okay. So basically, the book says, hey, this slavery thing, the reason why most of the world right now doesn't have is just not morally acceptable, simply because from the moment in which the point of history in which slavery was accepted until now, in that moment, in that time that passed, there were the right environment, the right people, like basically the right events, set of events and environment into making uh, this outcome. What does that mean? That if those key events, key moments, key people, environment didn't happen, it's very likely that we will still live in slavery today. I know that sounds crazy, but here's the thing. This is the thing about the book. Like, is nothing is something that is just not it's not conventional thinking, right? So and we really think about it, it's like it makes sense, obviously, and logically. When you think about it logically and you think in critical thinking, it makes sense. Okay, so if we have point A in history, point B is where we are now, 2025. Point A, what, 500 years ago? Point A, slavery was accepted. Point B, not accepted. What happened between point A and point B? Well, a set of key events, key people, and the right environment to get rid of slavery. What happens if those key events, key people, and environments were not there? Probably we will still have slavery. So that's the thing. That's another thing. It's very important to not only push the right values, and obviously it's very difficult because, as I previously said, what is seems a lot of ideas that right now seem morally unacceptable were acceptable 500 years ago. So that means that it's very likely that a lot of ideas that we accept today are not going to be accepted or are not going to be the best for the future, 500 years in the future. So obviously, you got to think a lot in the future when talking about what ideas to push whenever. And obviously now you have found those ideas that actually seem to be the best for the future, is obviously pushing them. And pushing them is really hard because, as I said, there's a lot of variables involved. Like, you know, there's a lot of variables involved. Like, there's a lot of events, and so. But yeah, I don't know. It's just all of this is just very interesting to think about, and it's very important. I think very important to just, as I said, think about. Like, just know that it exists. Have the idea in your head. you know, because you never know. Like the more people have like these ideas in mind, the better. Because like you never know. Like the more amount of people these the more people know about these ideas, the more it will the higher the probabilities it will reach leaders or like people like politicians or entrepreneurs that actually have a very tangible impact in the world. You know what I mean? Or simply um, the next politicians, the next entrepreneurs, the next leaders, the next generation that is going to affect the world is going to have those ideas. Um, so yeah. Now there's this another thing. There's this other part that the book talks about. It's basically about safeguarding civilization. So this is where we get into the events of what happens if there's a nuclear war. What happens if this? What happens if that? So it talks about extinction. It talks about collapse. It talks about stagnation. I think I already made a video in regards to the stagnation part, which was basically technological stagnation. And to summarize as much as possible, basically it was okay. In the case of stagnation, basically said, okay, technology, it was focused on technology because, that's like a very great indicator of like improvement in humanity and if it's stagnant or not. But basically said, hey, technology doesn't naturally improve. Technology relies on a lot of people working really hard to make this technological progress. And every new set of technologies, every new set of innovations gets harder and harder. Therefore, we either need more people working on those set of technology innovations, or we just need an AI, AI that helps us out. Because obviously, if you keep like having more people working in innovation, there's going to be a point where you're going to need the whole humanity working on innovation. And obviously, that's just not going to be it. Not everyone likes doing that. So you either need that or AI that it's basically, for example, you have 10 researchers working on an innovation. With AI, you have 10 million uh, researchers. Um, the only difference is that the 10 million that you added is like the AI, and the 10 researchers are like biological humans, right? Researchers. Um, and obviously, the best is doing both. So basically, increasing the amount of people that work in innovation and whatever, and also, uh, get closer to these AI that helps us out into getting more innovation, and therefore not be stagnant. Because it is very likely that we can have a technological stagnation if we don't work in those two things that I just talked about. And now, obviously, the book talks about then, oh, okay, we need AI, right? But now here's the thing, the AI alignment problem. How do we align it to not wipe us out? So there's a lot of things. But that's the stagnation, very interesting one to think about. Then we're talking about extinction. And in general, an extinction is just basically saying, for example, in nuclear wars, it's very likely that we are not, it's basically that we are like, it's very likely that we are not going to go fully extinct, meaning there's going to be zero humans. Obviously, we're going to collapse. Like, it's going to go from, like, probably 90% of humanity is going to be wiped out. So here's the thing, there's still going to be that 10% remaining. Now, obviously, it's a problem because if you have 10%, you know, what happens to all the technological progress that we have had? It's gonna be there's gonna be it's just higher likelihood of technological stagnation because you know you just lose a lot of people, you lose a lot of key people that were working your things, you'll lose very valuable infrastructure and whatever. And yeah, basically it's not good. Even if 10% of humanity still survives, it's not good. Because if you have that 10%, how do you make it back to the moment that we were previously before that, like a collapse? It's very difficult. And here it comes in play something that Seems very counterintuitive, but actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. And that is that fossil fuels in this situation where that I'm talking about, fossil fuels could actually save us and get us back to the top. So what does the book talks about in here? It's basically saying that, you know, fossil fuels and the industrial revolution led us to the current technology that we have, and fossil fuels and all of these things are even being like the primary source of these like sustainable energy solutions, like for example batteries, um, solar panels or whatever. We need fossil fuels to produce that. And obviously that's the famous argument that, oh, what is the point of electric cars if they are made with fossil fuels? Here's the thing. Right now they're made with fossil fuels. um, the thing here is to be making these innovations with fossil fuels until we don't need fossil fuels, until the innovation that we have done is good enough in order to no longer need fossil fuels. And the book actually talks about this, like if it was a mountain climber that needed a tool to climb the top. And once it gets to the top, it no longer needs a tool and gets it away. So in this case, in this analogy, the tool that the mountain climber is using is fossil fuels, and the top is once you no longer need fossil fuels, and therefore you throw it away. Um, and basically, how fossil fuels could save us all? Well, as I said, fossil fuels are needed to, or at least currently needed to create all of the current technology. And obviously, the trend is that we're needing less amount of fossil fuels, and that's the trend. That is where we want to get to. So if there was this collapse situation, we will need fossil fuels to get back to where we are at now. And therefore, this is a very interesting thing. And this is like another argument to why we need to get away from fossil fuels. Because just think about it. Okay, let's say we still continue going on fossil fuels and we totally uh, empty the fossil fuels reserves. Like fossil fuels disappear because we just literally used all of them. Okay, yeah, we still we have sustainable solutions and whatever, and we still keep relying on that. But what happens if in that situation we collapse? Well, we no longer have fossil fuels. Since, I mean, collapse is literally collapse of like most of the humanity, most of the people in the world, and collapse of most of the sustainable solutions that people were relying on. So now, how the 10% missing population is gonna exist without those sustainable solutions? And then the only like solution that we had in order to get back on top, which was fossil fuels, is no longer there because we literally wiped it out. That could be super depressing because I mean I'm not saying it's impossible, and the book is also not saying it's impossible, but it's gonna be very difficult to get back to the top. And that's very interesting. I mean, maybe I'm saying it very in a difficult way. It's not um, very easy to understand. But like, it's basically very interesting how fossil fuels could actually help us out whenever there's a collapse scenario to get back to the top. So basically, use that tool for the climber to get to the top again. And I don't know, like that's kind of interesting. That's kind of like a argument to not, uh, you know, to not to stop using or decrease as much as possible over the next years or over the next time horizon the usage of fossil fuels to still have like that reserve for any you know collapse. I don't know. I'm just throwing a lot of ideas, but basically all of these ideas are in regards to safeguarding civilization. Right? I mean, there's just a lot of things in the book, man. um and then what else? Okay, I'm right now seeing the table of contents and the chapters of the book to see if I'm not missing anything. Okay, I'm really missing a lot. Let me get back. Where's the index? So yeah, that was in regards to like safeguarding civilization, and obviously I forgot there's this other argument that, you have already probably heard it from Elon Musk, that we need to go to other planets because if anything happens on Earth, we're gonna safeguard civilization. And obviously, you know, we, the book gives you different ideas, not only that one, but basically gives you all the ideas in which we could safeguard civilization. And the best possible scenario is just we do all of them. So we go to the Mars, we do the Elon thing, we do the SpaceX thing, we do the thing that I just talked about. We just do all of it. That's just going to increase the probabilities that we safeguard civilization and therefore have those, you know, that therefore safeguard that future that could be best, right? So there's this other thing, which is this one is a very, very, very like, it's a very interesting chapter, but it's also a very, how do you say it? It's not a very tangible chapter. I forgot a word. There's basically a chapter that, you know, it's not like hard signs of, oh, this is proved to be true. Like it's just very speculative because it involves, for example, the happiness of people, of the population. Will the future be good or bad? Things that are, very nuanced. And yeah, in general, the happiness of people and the population, right? You start to get into some more nuanced topics because what is happening? How do you know what's happening and whatever? And in that case, I don't want to get too much into that. I mean, because as I said, it's a very nuanced topic. But basically, it's talking about like this thing that the book talks about, which is moral, sorry, and yeah, population ethics. And basically, it's about this argument of, hey, yeah, we know that we need more people, right? But like, it's not only about how much people, because this is also, I actually forgot to mention this on the safeguarding civilization part, which is that, yeah, we're like humanity is the declining in fertility rates and birth rates, and that's also a very important problem that a book talked about and whatever. And basically, the solution is have more babies, right? Harm more people, and basically just like at least have the population be above replacement rate because right now a lot of countries are just not are below replacement rate, and that's really not going to be good news in the near future. And you know now we get into this part, which is okay, it's not only about having people but also the quality of the lives of those people. It basically gets to a lot of moral arguments, philosophical arguments. This is more philosophical topic. Gets to different arguments of, oh, we should have like a baseline of, you know, bringing a new life into the world. Should you basically like for every new life, you should at least have a minimum level of happiness of five. Like, obviously, here's all the questions. How do you know how do you measure happiness? Like, there's all these nuance. Obviously, tries to make it simple in order to obviously address these themes. But yeah, generally, I just think it's a great way to just keep questioning yourselves and our philosophy and be philosophical about all of these topics because it's not solved. Like that one thing that is for sure, and I think the author is really doing a great job there, is that all of these different more philosophical arguments in regards to population ethics, when you get them to an extreme, get to a flaw or to a thing that we just doesn't make that much sense. For example, there's this philosophical argument of, hey, we need to if happiness had a maximum level of 100 and a minimum level of -100 being like total misery, and 100 being the best life you have ever lived, and zero being like normal. We need to have at least for every new human being born a minimum happiness level of 5. Okay, so you have that, and now you have a population of 10 people, sorry, a population of 100 people that are in there. Sorry, no, a population of 10 people, a situation where there's 10 people with that moral thing, and then another situation where there's 100 people where there are in which their lives is worse, like let's say, I don't know, minus something, -5. In general, the one of the -5 population is going to be generally better because it has, um, in general, on average, um, m- more people that are like okay than the other one. You know what? I don't think I'm doing it right. No, I don't think that was a thing, but it was something similar that basically compared that argument, that philosophical argument of having a minimum level of happiness with another one which seemed worse per person, but in general, it was better because it was more, there were more people. That's an example of uh, getting all these philosophical arguments to an extreme where, yeah, in theory they sound great, but when you get it to an extreme, it doesn't seem that great. So obviously, in that case, it's not great to have more people, but but each of those people are miserable. Than have fewer people, but those fewer people are great. So here's the thing, that's where you need to think about all of that. Now, in general, I think we just need to look at history. History is a great tool, and just look at what has enabled us to improve our quality of life. Because happiness, is a big the reason why happiness has a lot to do with quality of life, and what has improved quality of life. One of those things, technological progress. I shall say the primary thing. So this leads us to the previous argument of keep making technological progress to not have that technological stagnation for the quality of life of human beings to keep improving. Like right now, for example, with this AI boom, in the next couple of years, the next couple of decades, with these incredible advancements in AI, especially in humanoid robots, there's going to be a lot of abundance. So, you know, uh, things are going to be cheaper. They're going to be, because robots are going to be producing them or whatever. Okay, that's another topic. But yeah, basically, one of those primary things is keep getting better in the technology. And obviously, that leads us to what I previously talked about, which is how do we keep getting better in technology. But yeah, like this one is a very nuanced one because it's talking about happiness and all of that. But it's definitely a very interesting one um, to think about. And then finally, I just want to let go with the actual final words of the book, which I think are just great, great words that are literally encompass the final message of this book. So, quote: Can one person make a difference? Yes. Mountains erode because of individual raindrops. Hurricanes are just a collective movement of many tiny atoms. Abolitionism, feminism, and environmentalism were all merely the aggregate of individual actions. The same will be true for long termism. We've met some people who have made a difference in this book: abolitionists, feminists, and environmentalists, writers, politicians, and scientists. Looking back on them as figures from history, they can seem different from you and me, but they weren't different. They were everyday people with their own problems and limitations, who, nevertheless, decided to try to shape the history they were part of, and who sometimes succeeded. You can do this too, because if not you, then who? And if not now, when? Out of the hundreds of thousands of years in humanity's past and the potential billions of years in the future, we find ourselves living now at a time of extraordinary change, a time marked by the shadow of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with thousands of nuclear warheads standing ready to fire, a time when we're burning through our finite fossil fuels reserves, producing pollution that may last hundreds of thousands of years. A time when we can see catastrophes on the horizon, from engineered pathogens to value locking to technological stagnation, and can act to prevent them. This is a time when we can be pivotal in steering the future into a better trajectory. There's no better time for a movement that will stand up, not just for our generation or even our children's generation. but for all those who are yet to come. End quote. Yeah, that's what we owe the future. Very interesting book. Recommend to everyone, every single human being to read it. And very interesting. So let's go.